everybody, and welcome back to the channel. The Batman Marathon continues as I look at yet another set of action figures from McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse line, and today I'm returning to the Batman and Robin wave, and I'm really pleased because despite getting my Batman, I was expecting to get the other figures in this wave a little bit later, actually in the new year, but they've come a little bit early as an extra Christmas gift, so I'm able to take a look at these with you now. And today I'm going to focus on the other dynamic duo, which is Batgirl and Robin. So let's dive straight in and take a look at the packaging. I'm going to start with Batgirl today, and the packaging is pretty much uniform across all of these figures, so I'm just going to cover it the once in this video. As you can see, it is the standard DC Multiverse packaging. It's got those black borders, but it's a little bit broader than your typical single-carded figure because it has to allow for the Build-A-Figure pieces, so it's a little bit wider than we normally get. I think this is really good in terms of presentation. It has that fantastic window display. We have the typical collage in the background, that blue and white kind of colour, which helps the figure in the packaging actually pop out a little bit more. That works really well here against the black versus the blue and white. I think that is actually really a stark contrast, and that helps show off the figure really nicely. There's not too much else to talk about at this stage, but if we flip it and look at the side panel, we can see we have the Batman and Robin logo, and we have this fantastic sort of red colour with shades and some washes of black running through it as well. I really like this. This is a significant improvement over the standard black borders we tend to see in the DC Multiverse line. I still would prefer to have a nice image of the particular character we're looking at, but I will settle for this as a slight marked improvement. And then finally, if we look at the reverse sleeve, we can see we can see they actually have an image there of Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze taken from the movie poster. They've just zeroed in on this one element of the poster, and I think this is quite striking. I think this is really cool. It's just a shame that we don't actually have something that's more character specific. This is exactly the same on every single one of these figures. The only thing that changes, of course, is the Build-A-Figure piece that's highlighted in that diagram there. And we can see the other characters available in the wave at the very bottom. We see those individual headshots, but it would have been nice if that had been larger so that we could have seen more of that particular character. So in terms of the display, this is very typical. This is kind of what we see with each figure, so it's not really distinct or individual, but it's still fairly presentable. So let's open her up and take a look at the figure itself. Now I have to be honest, this isn't a character I ever particularly liked in the film, and obviously I talked in my last video about having mixed feelings about that film in general, but I have to say this is actually a tremendous figure, and I'm really pleased with the results. If we start by taking a look at the head sculpt, I think they've done a really good job with this. I think they've caught the likeness of Alicia Silverstone really well here. This seems to be pretty much pitch perfect. I can't find any faults with it. It seems to be pretty much spot on, and I also really like that they've actually bothered to actually use some paint apps for once, because this is something I'm always criticising McFarlane Toys for, but here we can actually see a number of different colours and washes in the hair, giving it a little bit more depth and texture. The combination of these different tones really give it a much more lifelike quality, and I think they've done a really good job. I also like the contrast between the paleness of the skin and the brightness of the red of the lips as well. This works really well, and I think all in all I have to commend McFarlane Toys because I think they've done a pretty nice job here. Likewise, the sculpting for the rest of the body is really excellent. Of course, this is a brand new sculpt specific for this figure, so it's pretty much unique. I can't imagine they can really recycle many of these parts, which is quite nice. So I think this looks really good. There's an awful lot of detail here. In fact, I'm noticing details on the figure that I didn't even know were on the costume. So I think they've done a really good job. I particularly like the gauntlets there with the spikes sticking out. I think they look really cool. They're quite sharp and pointed. And again, I didn't realise that they were so different on each of the costumes for Batman, Robin and Batgirl, that each one has unique gauntlets, which is really cool, and I never noticed that until I had this figure, so that's absolutely fantastic. I think they've done a really good job with this sculpt all in all. I think it looks really authentic, which is brilliant. There's no paint washes running through it, which is a shame. It would have enhanced that, and I think the material they've used is more of a matte black instead of a glossy, and I think the glossy might have worked better here because in the film these costumes look like PVC. They catch the light a lot more than the figure actually does, but that's a very minor nitpick. All in all, this looks really good. And I have to say, I had my reservations about the boots, especially with the heel. I thought she might struggle to stand freely, but actually no, she stands really well on her own 2 feet. In fact, I think she probably stands a little bit better and easier than the Clooney Batman, which is interesting. So no issues here. I think this is really solid. Her cape is also really cool. It's very stylized. It is molded into one shape. It's a little less flexible and the material's a lot more of a harder plasticky kind of rubber than we saw on the Clooney Batman, which is a shame because I really liked his cape. But this holds its shape really well and I think this looks really good. Looking at the articulation, she does have a ball joint in the top of her neck, so she can spin her head from side to side, but it is going to be limited a little bit by that hair. Now that is a rubber, so it is fairly flexible, but it's still quite limiting. So she can nod her head up and down, for example, but really it's going to nod more forwards than backwards. Now she has ball joint in the shoulders and she has this wonderful butterfly joint at the top of the shoulder there, allowing the arms to come forwards and out, which is brilliant. There's a complementary bicep swivel. There's a double joint at the elbow, which is absolutely tremendous, and then we have that ball joint at the end of the wrist there, allowing that hand to rotate all the way around and hinge forwards and backwards. Now she's got 2 points of articulation in her torso. She has one at the top of the chest there, allowing herself to spin from side to side and also lean left and right, and she has another one in the waist which has the exact same movement, so that really you can get a tremendous range of motion leaning from side to side, and she can lean forwards and backwards a really good distance as well. Now she's got ball joints in the hips, allowing the legs to kick out to the side. They are disguised by those sort of rubber pants that she has as well, which works pretty well. The legs can kick forwards, they can kick backwards, and there's another double joint at the knee, allowing that lower leg to kick all the way back there, which is pretty cool. Now there is a sort of pin swivel at the ankle, allowing the foot to rotate from side to side, but also hinge forwards and backwards, which is brilliant. And then we actually have some toe articulation just thrown in for good measure. As a quick scale comparison, here she is standing next to the Clooney Batman. As you can see, the Batman obviously is a lot taller than the Batgirl. That's exactly as it should be. And I should also point out, and sadly I didn't capture here, but the Batgirl's actually shorter than the Poison Ivy figure as well. Again, that is pretty consistent with the sizing that we see in the film, so top marks for McFarlane Toys for getting that right. Now, sadly, she doesn't come with any accessories apart from her stand and trading card, which is really disappointing. Not even a Batarang, which is a shame, especially since she just comes with 2 closed fists, so we don't even get an alternate pair of hands. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to lose a star for that, but all in all, I'm happy to give this 4 stars because I'm tremendously impressed with this figure. This is a figure I had fairly low expectations for, to be honest. Of all the figures in this wave, this is probably the one I was least interested in, but I have to say I'm really, really pleased with it, and I think they've done a really great job. I really like this figure, and I love the articulation. I think the sculpting is brilliant, and I think they've done a nice job with the paint apps where they are as well. So yeah, I think they've done a really good job. I just wish they'd given her a few accessories. Okay, so next up we have Robin, and I have to admit, I was really looking forward to opening this guy up because of course he is one of the eponymous heroes of the film, and this is my favourite costume for this version of the character. Now, in terms of the sculpting, I think they've done a pretty decent job here. It doesn't look quite right to me. I think the head maybe looks a little bit too elongated for Chris O'Donnell, but it definitely has a look of him. It's definitely recognisable as him. I think all the proportions are right, especially around the eyes and the nose and the mouth. I think this looks pretty accurate, but there's just something about the hairline, I think, and as I said, the shape of the head just looks a little bit too elongated. But other than that, this is a pretty good sculpt. But where I feel the figure is less successful than the Batgirl has to be around the paints and the colours they've used for the costume. So as we can see here, of course, they've gone for the same matte black, which I think is maybe a bit of a mistake as a baseline. The actual sculpting, the detailing all looks pretty much pitch perfect for me. I can't really find any fault with this. I think it looks really good, but it's all about the paint application and the materials they've used for me. So obviously there is a contrast there between his rubber pants against the plastic of the black of the body there. That does stand out. Obviously there is a slight difference in the colour of black that they've gone for there, so that looks a little bit weird. Also the red they've used, while it's a very vibrant red, which is great, it doesn't quite look right when we look at photos taken from the film. It just looks a little bit maybe too dark a red and maybe needs to be lightened up a little bit, and of course it really needs to be that sort of more reflective kind of material rather than the sort of the paint they've opted for. It needed a slightly different paint, I think, more of a glossy paint to kind of recapture the look in the film. Now I'm being nitpicking here, but all in all this is a really solid effort and I think they've done a decent job. There's not much in the way of paint apps except when we look at the boots, we can see there's actually a bit of a white wash running through that to give it a little bit more depth and texture, which is great. So I'd like to see more of this from McFarlane Toys in future. Now, when we look at the cape, very similar to the Batgirl, this is sculpted into place. This is more of a harder, plasticky rubber kind of material. It is a little bit flexible, but you're not really going to be able to do anything with it. It's going to be fixed in that one shape. And to be fair, I think that works perfectly well here. The articulation scheme is pretty much identical to Batgirl. He has a ball joint at the top of his neck, allowing his head to spin all the way around, lean left and right, and yes, nod up and down. Obviously, he has a lot more flexibility than Batgirl because of his hair, which is great, although he can't look up as far as I would have liked. But yeah, this is a pretty fantastic range of motion all in all. Of course, he's got that same ball joint socket, which is great, so the arms will come forwards as well as out, which is brilliant. They'll lift up. There's a complementary bicep swivel there. There's the double joint at the elbow, allowing the hand to go all the way back to the head, which is just superb. I love this. And he's got the ball joint at the wrist, allowing that hand to rotate all the way around and hinge forwards and backwards. Now, I've often complained about this ball joint because McFarlane Toys use it an awful lot. I don't think it's the most attractive, and I don't think it actually is the most functional either, but it certainly does the job here, and it's actually quite well disguised. I think it works particularly well on these figures. Now, he's got the same 2 points of articulation in the torso as well. One in the upper chest, which is brilliant, that ball joint there, allowing him to spin from side to side, lean left and right, and another one complementary in the waist area as well. That really allows maximum range of motion here to spin this figure all the way around and lean him to really far extremes, and I love this. I think this is absolutely fantastic stuff. Of course, he can bend forwards and backwards a really healthy distance as well. Moving on, he does have ball joints in the hips, of course, and they are mostly disguised by the rubber pants, which work pretty well. So he can kick his legs out to the side, he can kick his legs forwards, and they'll go back a little bit as well. There's a double joint to the knee, allowing that lower leg to kick all the way back, as we saw before, and he's got that strange sort of swivel come ball joint in the ankle as well, allowing that foot to spin from side to side, but also hinge forwards and backwards. And then to cap it all off, he's got the toe articulation. Once again, he's quite light on accessories, but he does actually have a couple. He has some of these ice effects, which are really cool and very unexpected. I didn't think we'd get anything like this. I think these are really cool. They just clip onto the head and the leg, and it recreates that moment from the film when he gets iced up by Mr. Freeze. And I think this is really cool, and it's nice that McFarlane Toys are doing something different, and they have bothered to include something like this. So I do commend them for that. I'm still slightly disappointed that we don't get alternate hands, and we don't get anything, not even a Batarang, or a Robin Rang in this case, I guess, which is a real shame because, of course, you know, the Batman characters have so many gadgets, and it's really sad that we're not getting them. Okay, so mixed feelings from me. I'm still going to give this figure 4 stars. I actually was tempted to knock a star off, but then I thought the fact that he does come with that fun accessory there with the ice actually kind of puts it up a notch in my opinion. So I'm happy to give him 4. I think as a figure, he's slightly less impressive than the Batgirl. I think the Batgirl's really good. There's something about this figure that's slightly underwhelming, and I think maybe it's just the slight inaccuracies in the costume or the paint they've used. Like I said, the head sculpt is really good, but also not quite right. So maybe it's that. There's just something about it that is a little bit disappointing. But all in all, it's still a really solid figure. I really love the articulation scheme on these figures. I think they're absolutely top notch, and I hope we see more of this from McFarlane Toys because I think they're nailing it in this department. I just wish they'd up the game when it comes to accessories. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.